Sam Altman and Elon Musk asking, what happens if AI becomes powerful and who gets to control it? They brought in Ilya Sutskever, one of the world's top AI scientists, and Greg Brockman, the engineer who helped scale Stripe to millions and millions of businesses. They aligned on three things that must be true. They didn't want AI to scale out of control. They didn't want it to be controlled by big tech. And they didn't want it to become unsafe. But they were missing something, someone to push harder on safety, on alignment, and what happens if this actually works. So they brought in Dario Amodei, an AI researcher obsessed with safety, who would later become one of Sam Altman's fiercest rivals. But this just wasn't a company. It was a very specific group of personalities with very different ideas about what this should become. And if you look closely, you can almost predict how this ends. So Sam Altman is Paul McCartney, the organizer, the one who takes the vision, manages all the moving parts, and ships it. Dario Amodei is John Lennon, the visionary with the strongest convictions and the one most willing to walk out when the philosophies stop matching reality. Ilya Sutskever is George Harrison, quietly brilliant, deeply philosophical, the one asking the deepest questions. Greg Brockman is Ringo, the engine, the one who makes everything actually work. And Elon Musk is George Martin, the producer, the one with the resources and the gravity to make it happen. Now, here's the thing about the Beatles. They didn't break up because they stopped being talented. They broke up because success changed what each of them wanted. The pressures got bigger, the philosophies diverged, and eventually the thing that made them magic became the thing that tore them apart. Same story here. So let's talk about how they built OpenAI. OpenAI worked because they had something rare in the room: scientific depth, startup speed, money, and a mission that felt bigger than anyone in the company. Sam could create the momentum out of thin air. Dario could turn research systems into real systems. Ilya could push the boundary of what was possible. Greg could build the infrastructure to make it all run. And Elon could bring the kind of gravity that made the world pay attention. In the early years, they made a huge bet. Instead of building narrow tools, they built a general purpose model. The kind that gets smarter, the more data and computing power you throw at them. This is called the scaling bet. More data in, more smart out. And if that was true, this wasn't just a technical bet. It was a race, because whoever built this the fastest would shape the future. But the key breakthrough actually didn't come from them. It came out of Google in a paper called Attention is All You Need, led by the research scientists at Google. The core idea was something called a transformer. At a high level, these systems are trained to do one thing: predict the next word. Given everything so far, what comes next? But the actual breakthrough was how they do it. Instead of reading one word at a time, they look at everything at once and figure out what matters. They pay attention to the right words, in the right context, all at the same time. That's what made them so powerful. And once you understand that, you understand why everything that comes next happens so fast. And OpenAI took that idea and scaled it further than anyone else. And that bet is now known by the famous acronym GPT. With that foundation, they started building. In 2018, GPT-1, a proof of concept. It works, but just barely. Then in 2019 comes GPT-2. Now it's different. The writing is better. It's more coherent, more fluid, good enough that it starts to make people pause. In fact, it was so convincing. And actually at this time, holding on to their principles, they didn't release the full model at first. And in retrospect, this is one of the first warning signs. They didn't release it because it didn't work, but because it worked far better than they ever expected. And that's when the conversation starts to shift from this is interesting to this could be dangerous, because now it's not just improving. Its pace of improvement starts to accelerate. And then in 2020, GPT-3. This is where it stops feeling like a research project and starts feeling real. People start using it to write code. I remember these days vividly. I was at Amazon at the time, and I was using GitHub Copilot to write code, and it was amazing. GitHub is like a living library of code where millions of developers are building software together in real time. And GitHub Copilot allowed you to do this faster than ever before. Now, it didn't work perfectly, but well enough so that you could see what the future was. And then in 2022, well, up until this point, everything has been building. The models were getting better, more capable, more useful, but still, it was mostly in the hands of developers, and there was a gap. The technology was powerful, but most people had never experienced it. So they made a decision that, in hindsight, looks obvious, but at the time, it wasn't. They took everything they had built and put it behind a single interface, a single box. You type, it responds, and they called it the now famous ChatGPT. And for most people, this was their first real experience with AI, not something they had heard about, something they got to experience. And suddenly, everybody gets it. And around this time, a much older idea comes back into the conversation. It's called the Turing test, proposed by Alan Turing, who helped break the Nazis' Enigma code in World War II. The idea was simple. If you can't tell whether you're talking to a human or a machine, does it matter? And for the first time, people start asking, after ChatGPT, are we already past it? Because suddenly you weren't just using software, you were talking to something that felt it understood you. And once that line gets crossed, you don't go back. This is the breakout moment from niche to mainstream, and it spreads faster than almost anything we've seen. 100 million users in 2 months. And suddenly, everything they talked about at that dinner was no longer theoretical, because the same fears that brought them together, not letting it scale so that it got out of hand, allowing big tech to control it, and fear around the safety of its use, they were all beginning to happen in real time. Inside a small group of strong personalities that doesn't stay contained. It builds the tension between them until something gives. And in the next episode, we're going to break it down. What actually happened inside of OpenAI? Who left and why? The internal fights over safety, over control, over Sam Altman himself. The deals that pulled in big tech, in the moment everything stopped being open. Because the breakup of OpenAI wasn't just about people leaving. It was about 4 completely different visions of AI emerging from the same room. And once you see that, you start to understand why the future of AI looks the way it does today. So please like and subscribe to make sure you get the next episode. And I'll still be doing my daily look at AI from Monday to Thursday, and I'll return with this bigger, longer form format on Sunday. Take care.